We have found a document about the Spartans and the Jews, indicating that we are related and that both of our nations are descended from Abraham. 1 Maccabees 12:21.
Dare we ask, did Abraham really exist? The mysterious figure Abraham, embedded deep within the biblical narrative, conjures fascinating queries. Might there be echoes of other myths that connect to the Abraham narrative? Yes, echoes, and dare I say, myths. If we're being audacious here, let's also claim that Abraham's tale might not be etched in the stone of history, but instead in the parchment of allegory. We're on a quest for truth, and not just any truth, but one that doesn't sugarcoat our sensibilities. Consider Peter J. Lightheart, a figure I may not always nod in agreement with, but who serves a cogent point as a voice of faith. He notes,
evangelicals are debating the historicity of Adam, but they are too timid. It is time to reject fundamentalist distortions of the Abrahamic narrative just as decisively as we have abandoned literalistic readings of Genesis 1-3. Clinging to discredited biblical accounts of Abraham as if these events actually happened makes us look like Neanderthals, undermines the plausibility of our witness, and ultimately overturns the gospel. To defend the gospel and uphold the authority of the Bible, we need to reckon with the myth of Abraham.
Lightheart's clarity is akin to a refreshing splash of cold water, especially for someone like me, who navigates ancient texts with a secular compass, regardless of their cultural origins. Yet, despite his insights, Lightheart still seems to hold the Bible as a divine artifact rather than a human creation. The conundrum remains. The tangible evidence for Abraham, let alone the events in Genesis, is as elusive as a desert mirage. Take, for instance, Abraham's sojourn in Egypt in Genesis 12. Uncannily reminiscent of Israel's Egyptian saga, which too seems more allegorical than actual. Whether these narratives stem from shared literary motifs or direct modeling, the debate remains. As scholars passionately debate these tales' origins, positing multiple authors across epochs or perhaps a single Hellenic-influenced scribe, we must ponder, if Abraham is less man and more motif, what message lies encrypted in his story? Our journey might find its compass pointing towards Greece. While the influence of cultures like the Mesopotamians, Canaanites, and Egyptians on biblical texts is almost universally acknowledged, the Grecian whisper in the scriptural tapestry remains understated. Yet, I remain convinced of this Hellenic echo. The vast Greek Septuagint, intertwined with biblical tradition, offers tantalizing clues. People imagine the Greeks as full-on pagan polytheistic peoples. However, the elite philosophers like Thales, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were the original gangsters of monism, with an ultimate divine power that rules over the divine lesser beings. The later Christians and Jews are in many ways indebted to these thinkers. And yes, for those who followed our previous explorations into Russell Gamirkin's insights, brace yourselves for another scholarly expedition into Abraham's possible Grecian roots. Join us as we wade into this confluence of biblical Greek connections. Let the Odyssey commence. Abraham's story in a nutshell. Born around 2170 BCE in the prominent city of Ur, Abram, later named Abraham, was a central figure in biblical history. Moving to Haran after the death of his brother Haran, he married his half-sister Sarai at 75, and he heeded a divine call to relocate to Canaan. Accompanied by Sarai and his nephew Lot, his story opens up with the immediate promise of a land that God will show him, and that he will be a great nation. Facing famine, they took refuge in Egypt, where, fearing for their lives, Abraham presented Sarai as his sister, afraid the Egyptians would kill him for her beauty. Mind you, Sarai is 10 years younger than Abraham according to these texts. So here's a 65-year-old woman who must have been smoking like a 20-year-old Playboy model. Odd detail. Their deception was uncovered, leading to their expulsion. Back in Canaan, tensions between Abram and Lot's household forced them to part ways. After Lot's capture in a regional war, Abraham heroically rescued him, and he bumped into Melchizedek, king of Salem, who was a high priest of the Most High God. Many questions abound for this figure. Anyways, around this period, Abraham lamented his lack of an heir, though God reassured him. Sarai offered her maid, Hagar, to bear a child. Hagar bore Ishmael, but tensions arose, leading to her exile. Can anyone say Jerry Springer any faster? Later, God renewed his covenant, renaming Abram to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah, foretelling the birth of Isaac and introducing circumcision. 3 divine visitors confirmed Isaac's upcoming birth and also warned of Sodom's impending destruction. Despite Abraham's intercessions, Sodom was destroyed, though Lot escaped, albeit the tragic consequences of his wife turning into a pillar of salt. Oh, and his 2 daughters drugging their father with wine to sleep with him to carry on a seed. In Gerar, Abraham, fearing for Sarah's safety again, called her his sister. King Abimelech took Sarah, but returned her upon realizing the deceit. Shortly thereafter, Isaac was born. Now, who's the real baby's daddy here? Abimelech or Abraham? Anyways, following more disputes involving Hagar and Ishmael, Abraham banished them, but they were divinely protected. In a supreme test of faith, God commanded Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. As Abraham obeyed, an angel intervened, providing a ram as a substitute. Sarah passed away at the age of 137 years, and Abraham secured a burial site in Machpelah. Abraham then arranged for Isaac's marriage and had more children with his second wife, Keturah. Ensuring Isaac was his sole heir, Abraham passed away at 175 years of age and was buried beside Sarah by Isaac and Ishmael. Eventually, his son Isaac would have children named Jacob and Esau. Then Jacob would get the promise and be renamed to Israel. Israel's favorite son was Joseph, who would get them into Egypt. You gotta read the story. And eventually they would become slaves for 430 years, all to have Moses take them on an exodus to the promised land, with Joshua leading victorious battles to get what God promised Abraham at the outset. The quest for the historical Abraham. Searching for Abe. From the hollowed echoes of the Dead Sea Scrolls, biblical authors have painted vivid portraits of iconic figures, treating them as historical luminaries, regardless of some of the rather eyebrow-raising assertions. Abraham's age of 175, a walk in the park compared to Adam's whopping 930-year tenure. Through the annals of history, historians and ecclesiastical scholars, with fervor akin to investigative detectives, have endeavored to tether these biblical tales to the realm of historical accuracy. Their tools? Intricate genealogies and comparative historiography, striving to lend the patriarchal chronicles an air of authenticity befitting the second millennium BCE. Yet, as time's relentless march continues, our academic arsenal has evolved, providing sharper instruments for dissecting the veracity of these age-old tales. The unquestioned existence of these biblical heavyweights was the modus operandi, even for the most discerning scholars, until, that is, the 20th century's latter half bestowed upon us a plot twist. Upon uncovering the intricate tapestry of sources that constitute the Genesis and patriarchal narratives, theories abounded. The documentary hypothesis, the supplementary hypothesis, and their scholarly siblings arose, all questing to reconcile the improbability of Moses single-handedly penning this voluminous work. By the 19th century, that notion had all but retired to the annals of antiquated thought. As we embark on this documentary, we'll be dancing on the shoulders of academic titans, luminaries like Thomas L. Thompson, John Van Cedars, Russell Gamirkin, Philip Wagenbaum, Philip R. Davies, and dare I say Neil Godfrey have not just entered the field of Old Testament studies, they've rocked its very foundations. Thompson and Cedars in the 1970s, in particular, have swayed scholarly consensus from assured affirmation of the patriarch's existence to an enlightened skepticism, suggesting the upbeat nature of an archaeological quest for their remains. Thompson's magnum opus, The Historicity of the Patriarchal Narratives, fittingly culminates this sentiment. So fasten your intellectual seatbelts, dear viewers. This is going to be a cerebral ride.